Hello investigators and welcome to Until the End of Time. My name is Werner. Today I'll be doing a quick recap video of the Edge of the Earth stream that happened yesterday at time of recording. A bunch of new player cards for the upcoming Edge of the Earth expansion were previewed by Maxine and Jeremy, and I would like to do a video about them to quickly talk about them. Specifically, we're going to be talking about Bob Jenkins, the salesman. We have the last two disciplines and deck building for Chen. We have everything for Monterey Jack except for his signature weakness. And we have a couple more rogue and survivor cards to go with Bob. This video is going to be on the shorter end of things because I have a very busy day ahead of me today, and because I think I'll do a longer video about these investigators later. On that topic, I do have a question for you. Would you prefer to see a single video covering all 5 investigators in one go, or 5 separate videos that each go into one of the 5 investigators? Let me know down in the comments below, or on Twitter, or on Discord. With that out of the way, let's get started with our new survivor, Bob Jenkins, the salesman. He's got 2 willpower, 4 intellect, 3 combat, and 3 agility. He's an entrepreneur, and he has some very interesting abilities. At any time, an investigator at your location may reveal to you the item assets in their hand. So, if you know, in Arkham, you're kind of supposed to play with your hand closed, not reveal what card you have in hand, but you can use Bob's ability to bypass that to see what item assets other people are holding, and that is important because of his other ability. You may take an additional action during your turn, which can only be used to play item assets from the hand of an investigator at your location under their control. Both investigators may spend resources to pay its cost. So that's a lot of text. It's kind of convoluted, but it kind of makes sense when you think about it. So basically, Bob can take an additional action every turn, but he can only use those to play item assets. However, with that additional action, he can also play item assets from the hands of other investigators at his location, in which case they enter play under their control and they can help contribute. It's worth saying that Bob is an investigator at his own location, so even in solo you can use it to play item assets from your own hand. Wrapping up his text box, he's got an Elder Sign effect, +1 for each item asset you control, which is fine. It's just a numerical change, doesn't do much else. He's got 6 health and 8 sanity. I won't go in too deep, but I think he's a pretty interesting investigator. He's got kind of a supporting ability, but that doesn't make him bad in solo, especially when we talk about what his deck building options are. Bob has a normal deck size of 30, but he has what we are now thinking of the Norman or maybe the Edge of the Earth investigator deck building rules, which is that he starts out as one class, specifically survivor, and then upgrades into a different class, in his case a rogue. His story being basically that he figures out that the end of the world is a great way to get rich, which is not the idea you want to take away from that, but you know, it is working for him. So he starts out with only survivor cards and 5 rogue cards and neutral cards in his deck, but then as he levels up he cannot take other survivor cards and instead takes level 1 to 5 rogue cards. He also has Shrewd Dealings, Greed, and a random basic weakness, which are also previewed, so we get to play him right now if we want to. Shrewd Dealings is a 2-cost asset with 2 intellect pips and a wealth pip. It is a talent, it is Bob Jenkins deck only, and it reduces the cost of each item asset Bob plays by 1. Keep in mind that with his special ability, Bob is still the one playing it, so you can use this to discount the items of other investigators. And when you play an item asset, play it under the control of any investigator at your location. So Shrewd Dealings comes with kind of a built-in teamwork, which is an event from the The Witch Legacy that lets you redistribute items, resources, and allies. That card never saw that much play, but hopefully this will have a bit more impact, especially because the discount is, of course, the reason you're playing this. Of course, all that good stuff doesn't come without a downside, and Bob has a weakness, Greed. Perfect, thematic. And it says, Revelation, take a horror. If you have 10 or fewer resources, take an additional horror. 5 or fewer resources, take an additional horror. And 0 resources, take 1 additional horror. Meaning that if you have no resources, this thing deals 4 horror to you. I think in most cases you'll want to try to stick above 6 resources with Bob, because that way this only ever does 2 horror to you. Hard if you drop Paranoia as your basic weakness, but it's not the worst because in Survivor and in Rogue there are cards that can help mitigate horror. I think Bob is a very interesting investigator. He has a kind of support-like ability, but that doesn't make him a team player because he's kind of a jerk. That being said, the ability to reduce the cost of items and just generally help the economy of the team can make your team run that much smoother. And his own stat line makes him kind of good. He's the first survivor we have that has 4 intellect. Moving on, we already talked about Lily Chen in the previous video. She's the martial artist. And if you'll remember, back then we did not have her deck building rules. Well, now we do. Her deck size is 30, and she, as we predicted, has Mystic cards level 0, Guardian cards level 1 to 5, Neutral cards 0 to 5, and 5 other Guardian cards at level 0. So she starts out as a Mystic with a tiny Guardian splash and then upgrades into Guardian. Her deck building requirements are a bit strange. She has 1 Burden of Destiny for each discipline asset and a random basic weakness. So if you'll remember, she has these disciplines which give her +1 to one of her stats and a powerful action ability. She starts with 1 of these, and as you can see under the additional requirements, every 15 experience she earns, she gets to add a different discipline, but each time she does, she has to add a copy of Burden of Destiny. She also has 1 additional deck building restriction that we did not predict. Well, I didn't predict, some other people did. She cannot take firearm assets. That makes sense, and also probably for the better because there's a lot of Guardians that like to have their big guns, and it is cool to see somebody who tries something different. It's also hilarious to consider that Bob can still bring a lot of guns, especially from the Rogue faction, and then play them under Lily's control, thereby just hooking up the martial artist with all the guns she'll need. That's a deck somebody's going to try at some point, and that somebody may be me, because it sounds hilarious. We have the last 2 disciplines as well. They were previewed on the stream. They both give +1 to a stat. The Prescience of Fate gives you +1 combat and then has an action ability. You get +5 skill value for the next skill test you perform this round. After that skill test ends, flip this asset over. This action does not provoke attacks of opportunity. And then on the broken side, it reads, reaction after the round ends. If you performed no skill test this round, flip this asset over to its unbroken side. This is a very powerful ability, but somewhat limited in its application. Spending an entire action to get +5 to a test, it sounds maybe better than it actually is, because while +5 skill value basically guarantees that you're going to pass most tests, it also takes a lot of time to get that going, and it's not the easiest to flip back over, because not performing any skill tests for an entire round locks you out of a lot of options. If you draw a card in Nifl's face that has a test on it, you're not flipping it back. If you have to do anything with enemies, that's probably a problem. As such, I expect that this will be a discipline that will mostly be played for the +1 combat, because if you are a Guardian that has 5 combat, that's pretty good. Meanwhile, the Quintessence of Thought, which I believe is how you pronounce that, gives her +1 intellect, and then an action ability that is pretty powerful. If you have fewer than 5 cards in hand, draw cards until there are 5 cards in your hand, then flip this asset over. And then a reaction after this round ends. If your hand did not have 2 or more cards in it at any point this round, flip this asset over to its unbroken side. To me, this action ability is much more powerful than +1 intellect, although I would like to see a Lily Chen intellect-based build, because that sounds super cool. That being said, for the time being, I think most people will include this for the action ability, and it is a really good one. When you run out of cards basically in your hand, you get to just reload 5 of them. That's an insane amount of draw. It'll be difficult to flip this back because you can only have a single card or no cards for an entire round. Even after your upkeep draw, you're gonna have to be committing and discarding pretty aggressively, and you're a Mystic Guardian, not exactly the faction known for discard abilities. However, I think this may be a discipline that most people will play just for the action ability, and then they'll hope their Elder Sign will flip it back, because Lily's Elder Sign can flip those disciplines back over. And that seems fine. A pocket draw 5, you could do a lot worse than that. Next up, we have Monterey Jack. Monterey Jack was almost completely previewed. We do not have his signature weakness yet, but otherwise we've seen all of him. He has 1 willpower, 4 intellect, 2 combat, and 5 agility. He is the archaeologist and the wayfarer. And a reaction at the end of your turn. If you started this round 1 location away from your current location, either gain 1 resource or draw 1 card. If you started this round 2 or more locations away, do both instead. And then his Elder Sign effect, +1. If you started this round 1 or more locations away from your current location, gain a resource or draw a card. 8 health, 6 sanity. Monterey wants to be running around the map, which is awesome. It doesn't work in every single scenario. Essex and Horror in High Gear come to mind, but otherwise this is pretty sweet. While a single resource or a single card may not seem like a huge benefit, it adds up quickly, especially since he can take cards that let him move without spending actions. Because his deck building, as we're now used to, starts out as Rogue and turns into Seeker, so cards like Pathfinder and the upgraded Shortcut are definitely cards he's interested in. He cannot take Adaptable, but it is worth saying that he can take and use most of the Seeker side quests, cards like the Strange Solution. They will take up level 0 slots while they are untranslated or unidentified, but as you upgrade them, you free up those slots and you may be able to put different cards in there afterwards. There are plenty of movement cards in both the Seeker pool and some in the Rogue pool, but there's also a lot of skill stuff, so I am very interested to see what people are going to do with him. He has the Trusty Bullwhip, Buried Secrets, and a random basic weakness. His deck size is 30 as normal. We do not know at time of recording what Buried Secrets do. Trusty Bullwhip is a 2-cost asset with 2 agility icons and a wild icon, item, melee, and weapon. It is fast, which is great on a weapon. Just gonna say that if you've played Finn, you know how good it is to have fast on a weapon. It is Monterey Jack's deck only, and it has an action to fight using agility instead of combat, which, given his agility of 5 instead of his combat of 2, is a pretty sweet deal. If this attack succeeds, you may exhaust the Bullwhip to either automatically evade the attacked enemy or deal +1 damage. It is pretty good, right? This is just straight up pretty nice. It gives you automatic evasion against enemies' combat, or it gives you some extra damage, great against small weenie enemies that you just have to get rid of. Sound effects that make you sound like an archaeologist are optional. There are finally 4 new cards that were revealed for any investigator, 2 new level 0 cards and 2 new XP cards. Starting with the 21 or Bust Rogue card, a 0 XP, 2-cost event, combat and agility icon, with a lot of text that basically reads you play a round of blackjack. Reveal chaos tokens, treat every skull, cultist, tablet or elder thing as 5, the autofill as 10 and the elder sign is either a 1 or an 11. Then you combine the value of all the tokens you have revealed, ignoring pluses and minuses, to count up to either 18 or less and you gain 4 resources, 19 to gain 5 resources, 20 to gain 6 resources, or if you hit the 21, you gain 9 resources. It's worth saying that at 18 or less, this is worse than emergency cash because you only net 2 resources, but at 21, this nets you 7 resources, which is as good as a hot streak level 4. At 0 XP, this card is wild, and I have no idea how good it is because I don't know what your bag is going to look like. I don't know how much you can manipulate this, but it is exciting and crazy and very, very rogue. If you liked Watch This because it was unreliable, but a lot of money, you'll like this. If you didn't like Watch This because it was unreliable, even though it gave you a bunch of money, you probably won't like this. Love the card, have no idea what to do with it. It's great. Then we have Schaffner's Catalog, a 2-cost 0 XP survivor asset, single intellect icon. It is an item and tome and it has some great art. It uses 5 secrets. If it has no secrets, discard it, and you can spend the secrets as resources to pay for item assets played by any investigator at your location. This is clearly a Bob card. It lets you help pay for item assets, but it actually has a surprising number of uses. So the money you get out of it by default is only e-cash levels, emergency cash, because it's 2 cost for 5, it's netting you 3. But it has some pretty interesting applications. First of all, it is an asset, so Yorick can replay it from his discard pile. If you're Bob and you have your Shrewd deal, what is it called? The signature card, this costs 1 less, so it gets you an extra resource. But also if you're using something like Dark Horse, which wants you to have 0 resources, this is great. You can play this for 2, and then have 5 resources you can spend on item assets that don't count as resources in your resource pool. Finally, one that I wanted to shout out is Patrice. This was mentioned on the Discord server a couple of times, but basically Patrice usually has about 2 resources during her turn because she's gonna get 1 resource in upkeep, she's going to use Madame Lebranche to get 1 resource, and then she's going to spend those 2 resources to do the same thing next round. This is a great way to spend those 2 resources, but have some money you can hold on to, because the problem Patrice is always running into is that she has to discard her entire hand at the end of the round and basically can't really plan for the future. This is a great place to put some resources for later, maybe to play your violin. That is an item, and let me tell you, you always want to play Patrice's violin. On that note, one last thought. This card may be very, very good in Parallel Daisy. Parallel Daisy can take tome assets from any class, and notably most tomes, if not all tomes, are items, so this helps you pay for them, but it also doesn't take up a slot, which is intentional. Maxine and Jeremy said so on stream, so it's not a misprint or anything like that. And basically, the card, the Parallel Daisy, gives you +1 willpower and +1 sanity for every tome you have in play. This makes it so you can have 2 more tomes in play that don't take up any slots, which makes that character, honestly, a lot better, because that was one of the biggest problems with Parallel Daisy, is trying to find ways to boost her willpower that didn't also use up the slots that would then use your willpower. Moving on to the XP cards, we have Untimely Transaction and the Red Clock, starting out with a 0 cost 1 XP rogue event Untimely Transaction with a wild icon. It is a favor. Reveal an item asset in your hand. Another investigator at your location may play that asset as if it were in their hand. If they do, draw a card and gain resources equal to that asset's printed costs. Really? Going to haggle with me now? This is such a funny card. It is it's just really funny, because you can just imagine that your teammate is getting hunted by ghouls and they're like, hey, help, and you're like, I have this gun, do you want it? Yeah, well then give me 4 resources. And they're like, I'm getting killed here. Well, then pay me 4 resources. The nice thing about this card is that the resources basically don't go away, right? Your teammate loses them, sure, but you gain them, so that's not that bad, right? Plus, if you are some rogues that like to have lots of resources, Preston or Jenny, you can maybe use this to get to those well-connected numbers. And it gives you card drawback, so it doesn't really waste it. It is kind of useless in solo, you want to point that out. But it is a really good kind of neat little economy trick, plus a great way that if you're carrying a lot of assets that you don't necessarily have to use, you can give them to somebody else so that they might be able to use them. And it's worth saying that only the person playing the Untimely Transaction is taking an action, so the other person does not provoke a tax of opportunity playing that asset, which can be very useful if they're pinned down by an enemy. Then the Red Clock, broken but reliable, is a 2 cost, 2 XP rogue asset with a single wild icon. It is exceptional, so it will cost 4 XP to put in your deck, and you can only have a single copy. It also uses 0 charges, and it is an item and relic, which means that in addition to your normal rogue access, Ursula and Kachi can take this. And then it has a forced ability. After your turn begins, either place a charge here or take all the charges here as resources. Then if it has exactly 1 charge, you may get +3 skill value for your next skill test. 2 charges, you may move up to 2 times, or 3 charges, you may take an additional action this turn. It also takes up an accessory slot. So the way this is usually going to play is you're going to play this, then next turn you put a charge on it, you get +3 skill value for your next test. Then the turn after that, you get up to 2 free moves. That's great, right? Maybe you only need the 1 move, but there's very rarely going to be a situation where moving isn't going to help you, especially if you know it's coming, right? Set yourself up to get advantage out of that move. Just get out of there. Those moves don't provoke attack opportunity either. Keep that in mind. And then the next turn, you get an extra action. I can't imagine a situation where that wouldn't be good for you. And then the turn after that, instead of adding another charge, which would then do nothing because you're at above the limit, you just take all of them out and you get 3 resources. That's great. This card seems great. This card seems so much upside. Sure, it's not like the most explosive, but it's just, if you play this early on, it's just going to keep giving you more and more value, because after that, and the cycle just restarts and just keeps going. And you just get another +3, and then another 2 moves, and then another action. It is also worth saying that on stream they mentioned that the Red Cloak may have another version, perhaps in a different class. There was definitely some reference thrown to a different clock. Well, that's about going to do it for me. This was a very short video, but I wanted to keep it brief after the hour-long video from before. Find me on Twitter, twitter.com/untilarkham. Find me on Discord, discord.gg/mythosbusters. I'm not actually a Mythosbusters, to be clear, but I use their server as kind of the central Arkham server because it really is. And if you aren't in there, please join us. It's really fun. If you want to check out the stream yesterday, it is on FFG Live. I'll have a link to it in the description below. And I would really love it if you would let me know in the comments down below if you would prefer one big investigator video for the Edge of the Earth investigators or 5 separate videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you until the end of time.